Is there any hope at all for the future of ARMS? ARMS is a game that I really wish had lived longer. The game didn't really sell enough to be a blockbuster in my opinion, with 2.72 million units sold, but it was really neat to have a new fighting game that was different from the rest. And I remember at the time, people were saying that the sales numbers were good for a game that's just entering the fighting game scene. Now, I still think that this game could have done better if they had made it more clear that you could use motion or traditional controls. Because I find that people, even to this day, still don't know that. Which, to be honest, I don't blame those people. If you didn't look too much into ARMS, then I don't think you would really know. But I think that Nintendo not getting that information out to the masses is kind of a problem. When you have a new game coming out, and you aren't relaying the options of the game, it could cause some people to not want to buy it. Because if somebody does not like motion controls, why would they really take the dive into this new series? I'm someone that doesn't really like motion controls myself. I think it's fine in some games, but I tend to prefer to just use traditional controls. And don't get me wrong, I mean, it's cool when they want to implement it, but I definitely prefer when there's an option. Because ARMS had some cool maneuvering you could do with motion controls, and even though you couldn't have as much nuance with using traditional controls as you could with motion controls, they still allowed it. So I thought that was great. But again, they didn't really market that, so some people may have passed on the game that could have bought it otherwise. The thing with ARMS, though, was that it was inevitable that Smash was going to overtake it once we got a new game in the Smash Bros. Series. So when Ultimate came out, it was just donezo for ARMS. I think that even with the most amazing marketing, ARMS wasn't going to be able to last. But I feel like ARMS and Smash should be able to coexist. They are so drastically different in how they play that these two games should be able to live on together. Like, yeah, they are both fighting games, but they play so differently. So I just feel like one of them didn't have to just outright destroy the other one. But there are other factors that didn't help ARMS when it came to keeping the player base active and getting them to want to continue to play the game. So who knows if this game could have ever continued to have an active player base. ARMS was so unique though, and having such a cool roster of characters was a really fun time. I love when Nintendo makes new IPs, and we can dive into this new game and have new favorite characters. It's a ton of fun. I still love when they make new Marios and new Donkey Kongs, but I like when they sprinkle in new IPs for us to get into. So with everything that I just said, you might be wondering, what does this have to do with the future of ARMS? Well, we have something on the horizon. And no, it's not Animal Crossing. It's the Switch 2. With the Switch 2, we not only have Switch 2 Edition games, but we also have select Switch 1 titles getting free updates. One of these games is ARMS. Me as an ARMS fan, I love this. I love that ARMS hasn't been completely forgotten or abandoned. But I'm afraid that this won't do much when it comes to reviving ARMS. I feel like all that will happen is there will be the few who see that ARMS is getting an update, and they'll go, oh, I'll check that out. And if all this update does is something like improve the resolution to be a little higher than 1080p, then I think that people will just have the game launched for a bit and then just close it. It really is unfortunate. I adore ARMS, but even myself, I don't think I will do too much with ARMS if it just gets a minor update. I think ARMS would need some sort of reboot, but I don't know how they would even do that. How could they prove to people that a reboot would be the one to have hope on, that it won't just die after a while? I mean, look at Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2. I had a feeling that game would die off. This situation is a little bit different than ARMS, because it did feel like Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 1 wasn't really complete, and it was pretty janky, but the way that they left that game and then moved on to a sequel, people didn't really want to make the plunge to a sequel when they may have felt cheated on the first one. And who was to say that the second one wouldn't die off like the first one? Even though it seemed more polished and it had more content, because the lack of content was a problem with the first one, getting people to believe that a new one will live on when the first one died, it's a hard thing to sell. So when it comes to ARMS, if they made a sequel, how do they sell it to people that it won't die like the first one? One of the problems they could try to fix is adding more content, because people did feel that the first ARMS game didn't really have that much content. But this is difficult because adding content to a fighting game is already a hard task. So they would need to add enough that it would get people to want to give the second one a try. But even just knowing that the first one died off, do you make that plunge to the sequel? I honestly think the only way they could really get ARMS to get a bump in activity would be to boost up the original ARMS with some sort of free update that is more than just graphical enhancements. It would have to be something that is substantial enough to get enough people to launch the game and have a more active online community again. I think that this could also be possible with an ARMS reboot, but again, I think that's kind of a difficult route to take, because how do you add enough that it feels worth it to buy if you own the first ARMS? I think ultimately what will happen is ARMS will be a game that came and went. I think it getting a free update is awesome, and hopefully it is more than just some graphical enhancements, but I'm not really holding my breath for anything more than that. It's great that ARMS got recognized again, but I think unfortunately, ARMS probably doesn't even have a future. It's a shame, but at the end of the day, this is just how I feel. It's not set in stone. We could get a trailer out of nowhere for something new with ARMS. Maybe they take the characters from ARMS and throw them into a new environment and have totally different mechanics. And heck, maybe the game's not even called ARMS. And they do pretty much go for a rebrand. ARMS isn't a game I lose sleep over, but it really is sad how ARMS felt like it had an inevitable grave, just waiting to be lowered into.